me, Jessie LeVay, and welcome back to my channel. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about how I made these lovely wings. I've made a few wing tutorials over the years, but I thought I would try to make a more updated one, and I did a little bit more camera work, things like that, so I'm hoping that this one will be a lot easier to follow. And although this tutorial will be very specific to this pair of wings, a lot of the elements and techniques that I'm using, I use in all of my wings, so you'll definitely be able to learn a thing or two about making wings through this tutorial. As you can see, these wings are not based on a Wings Club character as you might think. These are actually based on Princess Lolly from Candyland, which I will post a photo of here. I was actually asked to do a commission for these, and I've never done a wing commission before, and I was really excited to do a commission for wings that were a different fandom than I've ever cosplayed for myself. Since I worked very closely with the client, some of the decisions and types of materials and things that we did on these wings were specific to this client. So the way that you make your wings might be a little bit different. You might use slightly different materials. You might not add glitter here or there. So just know that when you're going to make your wings, you don't have to make them exactly like this. You have so much freedom, and I'll mention some of those as we go through. And before we get started, remember you can find me on all these different platforms, and all the links will be below. So let's go ahead and get started then. And these wings were made very similarly to how I made my Charmix Bloom wings, so I will be referencing these several times during the video. So the first thing that you're going to need is a very hefty wire. This is, I believe, 12 gauge steel wire. I got this from the hardware store. It is very thick and very heavy, and so this is what you'll need to make the skeleton of your wings. And you're also going to need a pretty hefty pair of pliers as well to be able to cut this. And you might even need the help from somebody with a little bit more muscle to help you out with this. So what you'll need to do is figure out the basic shape of your wings. If you can actually print out on pieces of paper the shape of the wings that you want. If you have enough pieces of paper, of course, you'll have to print it out on multiple pieces of paper to get it to be the size that you want. And then you can actually take the wire and trace over it as you are bending it. And that's kind of the part where you might need somebody with some muscle to help you bend this, because it is very difficult to bend this. But since this was a pretty basic shape, I didn't need to do any of that printing out. And I got somebody to help me make those nice loops, as you'll see. And once we made those loops, you'll see on the ends it is covered in duct tape. And not only is that going to help hold those pieces of wire together, those extra little dangly pieces, those long pieces are actually useful in the future, which I'll talk about once we get to the harness situation. Another reason why I like to use the duct tape is it helps to keep those pieces from being really pointy and sticking in your back. And again, it really depends on what type of harness situation you decide to go with, which I'll talk about later, of course, but it can be helpful to have that extra padding on there. So I was working with the client to figure out how we wanted to do these lollipop pieces. I wanted to make sure that they were very visible through the wings, and I wanted them to also be very sturdy. So what I ended up using was this very thin sheet of plastic. I've actually used this before in my Candyland Bloom wings, which I'll post a picture of. Triangles that you see all over the skirt, those are made of the same thing, and they were made very similarly to this. And we went with that thin plastic because it was clear and it was sturdy enough so that it won't bend or get moved around too much on the inside of the wings. So next thing we had to figure out was how to get the lollipops to be pink. And what I used, and same thing that I used with my Tynix cosplay, is I used a shifty cellophane. So I got a pink shifting cellophane, as you can see here. It is a little bit shifty, as you can see. It shifts from like a pink to a greenish yellow. And another reason I went with the cellophane is because I thought it would kind of look like when lollipops are wrapped up in plastic, sometimes they can be kind of shiny. When I did my Tynix wings and when I did the little crystals on my Tynix dress, I actually used a spray adhesive and I used a hairdryer to help seal it on. But since this was just such a small piece of plastic that we were working with, I didn't need to do that, and the sticky glue ended up working out pretty well. You just have to be careful when you're putting it on that you don't have too many cracks and bumps in it. A little bit is okay because it'll help to kind of give a nice crackly effect that will help it shift a lot whenever you're moving. But you don't want it to be so bubbly that it doesn't look good. So you got to be careful with that, and you can even use like a roller to roll it on nice and smooth, but I'll tell you, it really never comes out super smooth. It's really hard to make it smooth. So moving moving on to the little swirls in the lollipops, we decided to go with some thin ribbon, and I just pretty much just glued that all the way around and made our little swirly. I went ahead and glued in our plastic lollipops into the wings, and as you can see here, they are glued in on the side, and that was the first step that we did to making the wings come to life. I went ahead and added in little lollipop sticks. I just used foam for this because foam was nice and light. A big part of making wings is to make them as light as possible so that they don't kill your back while you're wearing them, of course. And the foam was sturdy enough that it would be able to stay on its own, but flexible enough that as the wings needed to be bent, it could also be bent along with that. And also, of course, protection first. You can see in the video I have on these little silicone thimbles that I love so much. They're so great to work with when you have hot glue. So the next thing was filling in the skin of the wings, I guess, as you can call. So that's this part here. We wanted it to be see-through, but also have a little bit of color to it. And I know that on camera it looks pretty clear, but it is definitely light blue. And what I did was I used some tulle for that. I typically use tulle for a lot of my wings. My Tinix wings were different, but my Bloomix wings, my Harmony Ham wings, and of course my Bloom Charmix wings are all made out of tulle. So like I said, I just wanted to show these again. Again, these look very clear on camera, but I promise you that in real life, they do look blue, and they're made the same way with the same skeleton made out of wire. And then I just glued in the tulle along the edge. And when it comes to putting that tulle on, you can either hand sew it all the way around, or you can just use some glue, which is what I typically do. You're gonna cover it anyway with the border, so it doesn't really matter if you glue it or not. For the first wing, I went and did one layer at a time to see where I wanted to end. I didn't want to make it too blue. I still wanted it to be see-through, but I didn't want it to be too clear either, if that makes sense. And the top layer is a shimmery light blue tulle as well, just to give it a little extra shimmer because they are fairy wings. Of course, they have to have glitter. So the next thing you have to do is add the border. There are a lot of different things that you can use for your border. My favorite thing to use is bias tape. So you'll see in the video here, you can see the size that I used. I typically don't use that thick of a size, but I was looking at the art that I was basing the wings off of, and I felt like that thicker bias tape would work the best. As you can see on my Charmix wings, I used a thinner bias tape, but again, that was choice based on how thin the outlines of the wings are for Wings Club versus how thick the outline is for these wings. So you kind of can just choose whichever thickness you think will work the best for your wings. And this is bias tape, so what it basically is a already folded over nicely ironed out piece of like fabric. It almost kind of feels like a thicker ribbon, but you can see here how it has a line down the middle and it folds over nicely, so you can kind of easily fold this right over the edge of your wings, over your wire, and you can glue it down. You can also sew this again. You can sew all the way around if you want, but you can definitely just glue it as long as you make sure that you're staying pretty neat. You can for sure make your own bias tape out of any ribbon or fabric that you have. If there's a really special specific one you want to use, there's lots of tutorials out there for it, and it's not too hard. Speaking of ribbon, you can definitely use something other than bias tape. I prefer to use bias tape when I can because it already does have that nice little fold over, and you can paint really easily on top of this if you want to add glitter or something like that. This is really, really nice material that things will stick to, so that's another reason I really like to use bias tape when I can. Sometimes you don't realize how much bias tape you really need, and you find yourself going back to the store. So if there's a good sale, definitely get more than you think that you need. Because sometimes you don't realize once you're going around and around these wings, how many yards it really is of wire. But I've definitely used ribbon in the past. Whatever you have on hand will work just fine. So now you'll see that we have one of our wings done. It has the lollipop on the inside, it has the tulle skin, and then it has the border around it. So now just 3 more to go. So as you can see here, I am showing that we added some extra glitter on top of the whole thing. We used this twinkle paint that you can find at your local craft store. You don't have to use this exact one. This is what I had on hand, but there are definitely a bunch of other brands out there that I've used. So once you have all 4 of those, you are ready to make your harness. Wings need to sit on your back in a way that's not going to be really painful and help balance the weight out. So I've made harnesses a few different ways, and I will show you my 2 favorite. So the way that I did my harness for my Wings Club Bloom Charmix wings is different than the way that I did my Bloomix and my Tinix and these wings. So I did these wings the same way that I did my Tynex wings, so I'll talk about that. And the reason that I chose to do the harness the way that I did was based on the client's request. Based on the size and shape of these wings, we definitely could have used either of these methods, but the client wanted to go with this type of harness because it definitely is a lot more sturdy. So I want to talk about the Charmix wings and how I did these ones. This is the same way that I did my Harmony from Hamtaro Ham wings. You can find a tutorial for that where I show you how I make the harness for that as well. For that, do you remember those long pieces that I showed at the beginning with the duct tape on them? You can actually duct tape them all together, cover them with some extra duct tape, and cover them with some nice soft fabric, and you can actually put this right down the back of your costume. In the case of my Charmix Bloom, I actually had to cut a little hole in the back of my costume to put this through, but it was just fine. And that way you can actually stick this right in between your bra and your skin, and you can also add some Velcro, which is what I did here on this side and on this side, and attach that on the inside of my shirt. That way it didn't like flop around so much. There's definitely a couple different ways you can make this. You can make it more of a U shape, you can make it a T shape. There's a couple different ways that people make them. This is how I did it, and this worked out pretty well for me. So as you can see, I have now turned the wings around so that we can get a look at this harness. Now I am going to be covering this with some fabric, maybe some false flowers, whatever the client chooses. On my Tynex wings, this part is actually covered up by a pouch that I made to fit my lights in. If you wanted to, you can actually add LED lights in here. You'd need to add them before you added the tulle, but it's definitely something you can do. It's something that I did with my Tynex wings. You can check out the tutorial for that to see how I did that. I left this bare for the video so that I can show you a little bit better about the harness. So to make a harness like this, you're going to need a few things. You're going to need some cardboard. I just use a cardboard box. You're also going to want some foam, some felt or fabric that matches your costume, and also zip ties. So the first thing you're going to want to do is take your box and cut it. Of course, be very, very careful with this. I use a box cutter or some really, really big hefty duty shears, but make sure that you get an adult or someone to help you if you need it. The reason I like to use cardboard is because it is light and also can be very sturdy. And you'll see in this video here that the reason that I chose this specific cardboard box is it is that corrugated cardboard, so it's got those little like zigzaggies in it. It really helps to have a couple of layers of sturdy cardboard in one small piece. So you'll want to make sure that your wings can fit onto your cardboard piece. So go ahead and lay your wings down on top of your cardboard and see what size you need to cut out, and make sure that you have two pieces that are that size. Then you will go ahead and glue those two cardboard pieces together. Yep, go ahead and glue them. I use hot glue. And to add a little bit of comfort, because this is going to be up against your back, I like to add a piece of foam. I just use craft foam. If you have something like EVA foam or something a little bit thicker, that might be a little bit more comfortable, but it will be harder to cut through later, which we'll get to. So I just like to use craft foam. I think it's worked out pretty well. So go ahead and glue your foam piece on top of your two pieces of cardboard that are already glued together. Next, go ahead and get some felt or some fabric that matches your costume, and go ahead and glue that on both sides. That will, one, add another layer of comfort to the side that's actually going to be touching your back, and also helps to hide the harness a little bit on your costume on the other side that's going to be facing out, like you can see here. So now you have to put in slots for your straps. So I go ahead and mark out on here where I want to put the straps. I make sure that I have slots, 2 slots for the arms and 1 slot to go around the waist. For my Tynex wings, I only did slots for my arms. I did not go around my waist. But again, I'm working with a client who wanted to make sure that their wings would be very, very, very sturdy, and having 3 points of contact is 100% the best way to keep your wings nice and sturdy. So you'll need to use a box cutter or some kind of really sharp scissors or a knife or something like that to get through all this, because remember, you're getting through 2 layers of felt, a layer of foam, and 2 pieces of cardboard. You definitely must get a parent to help you with this. If you are a child, make sure you get help. I am not a child, and I got somebody to help me with this because I just wasn't strong enough to like punch through. And the box cutter that I was using was not the sturdiest one, and I just want to make sure, please be safe while you're doing this part. Please get an adult. Please be safe while you do this part. And as you can see here, I had to use some big scissors as well to get through both sides. The box cutter was not cutting it. So once you've got your slats cut, you can go ahead and put in your straps. I personally like to use ribbon for a few reasons. Number one, ribbon is extremely sturdy. It will almost never snap on you, and you can tie it so it can be as tight or as loose as you need it. And another reason I like to use ribbon is, especially when I'm working with a client whose measurements I don't know, they're not my measurements, it's good to have ribbon so I can leave it as long as they need and they can just cut it down to whatever size is appropriate for them. You can always do something like elastic here and sew the ends of the elastic together, but again, I think this is great because it is nice and adjustable and you can tie it as tight or as loose as you need. It's easier to get on, in my opinion, and easier to take off. And you'll notice that I used a light colored ribbon on the arm parts and I used a pink ribbon on the waist. And that was because I figured the way that the costume looks based on the art that I was using is that the straps around the arms might be visible. So I tried to make them as close to the client's skin color as I could. And then for the waist, I know that she is going to be wearing a pink dress since Lolly has a pink dress. And so if she decided to put the ribbon on the outside of her costume, then it would match a little bit better. Now, the way that your costume gets put on, you might be able to put it on the inside of your costume. That's what I did for my Tynex and my Blue Mix costumes. I actually made either a hole in the back or made sure that I can get the straps of the harness through so that it wouldn't be on the outside of the costume. So now we're ready to put the wings on the harness. And the way I like to do this is using zip ties. So you'll see here I have very long zip ties and I will be putting those on the harness as well. So for this part, you're definitely going to need some help again. What you'll want to do is lay your wings down, make sure that they're exactly where you want them, and then you'll go ahead and start punching little holes around, just like we did for the ribbon straps. You'll want to put holes around a couple different areas on the wings that will help hold them up. So you put your little punches around and then you go ahead and put your zip ties through. And I left these long for now just so that you can see them, but you can definitely cut them almost all the way down. Once you get the zip ties on there, make sure that you pull them really, really tight. Again, you might need somebody's help that's got a little bit more muscle. And I use the zip tie method instead of gluing them or something like that. This has never failed me. They do not break. You don't have to worry about the glue melting during a hot convention or when you go outside to do photos in the hot sun or something like that. I've literally had glue melt on me on a costume that I was wearing when it was hot out. It wasn't one with wings, but still, I don't want that to happen to anybody else. And again, I wanted to leave this visible to you for this video. Again, I will be covering this up with some fabric. But you can see where the zip ties were, and you can see that this is really sturdy. And yes, of course, the wings are gonna flop and bop around just a little bit, but as you can see, they're not really going anywhere. Now I want to pop back to these wings for just a moment. As you can see, these don't have any straps on them. You could put straps on them like this, even if you do this type of harness. But for me, I didn't need them. These are small enough. I had the extra Velcro on the inside. I didn't need that. But again, it really depends on how you feel and if you're going to be wearing them to a bigger convention where they might be getting bumped into a lot. I definitely would think going with a harness that's more like this could be more sturdy and more helpful. So one more thing I do want to note regarding the harness is these straps will actually go right here. They won't cross over. The problem is my mannequin doesn't have any arms. So I just had to do it this way just to get it on here. But definitely when the client goes to wear it or when you go to wear yours, you can just like put them on like a backpack instead of crossing them over the front of you. This one will still go around your waist in the front like this. As you can see, this waistband is not really doing much, so you definitely just need these ribbons. But having this here can really help, especially with bigger, heavier wings, just to make sure that they're not gonna flop backwards or something like that. Another thing is, I know that on camera they look a little, you know, off, but I had to put these on a mannequin, again, that doesn't have any arms. So when you go to put this on your body, you can definitely adjust it in a way that it will be straight on your body. And the other nice thing is, since we are using a wire, you can still bend them. Because it's such a strong wire, you definitely won't be bending your wings, like they won't be getting all crunched up as you wear them at a convention. But if you need to bend them a little bit, either forward, backwards, whatever is more comfortable for you, you will be able to do that with this type of wire. You just might need a little extra muscle. So thank you guys so much for joining me for this quick tutorial. I hope that you were able to learn something from this. Again, please make sure to check out my other wing tutorials. I also have other tutorials on other stuff on here, so be sure to check that out. And if you have any further questions, feel free to message me on Instagram, or you can leave a comment below and I will get to your question. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Jessie Lube. I hope you have a wonderful day.